Hello, I'm a public representative, and it's my pleasure to introduce the last formal presentation of this morning. I have a script, so I'm not allowed to show you my improv routine. I'm sorry you're missing out on that. Charlotte Ackerman is the Clinical Trials Operations Manager at Bart's ECMC Cancer Centre. Charlotte is responsible for studies that are run by Queen Mary University of London and Bart's Health NHS Trust. Within her unit, Charlotte supports the investigators throughout the whole life cycle of a clinical trial, from original design concept through to final publication of results. Thank you, Charlotte.
Hi everyone. So I'm Charlotte. I'm aware that I'm the last talk before lunch, so I will try and make this as quick as possible. But I thought it was interesting that I was asked to do a perspective of the sponsor. So Bart's Health is one of our kind of sites. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to go through that for you. Can I just press this? Yeah, great. So firstly, why are trials important and what we're looking for? So I'm sure a lot of you know this, but trials are they're the best way to compare different medicines. They allow researchers to assess risk-benefit ratio of different treatments, but also we're trying to look at a wider variety of things. So as we said, we take samples, and I'll go into kind of endpoints that we're looking at when it goes to kind of designing of a clinical trial. So I'm based, I'll go through different types of trials, but I'm based over at the ECMC, which is part of Bart's Cancer Institute, which is down the road as part of Queen Mary University. So we're linked to Bart's, and I'm going to go through how we're linked. But we run early phase clinical trials. That's phase 1 and phase 2 trials. Phase 1 trials is like kind of first in man trials. Often the first time they're put into man, they're kind of aimed at finding the safety dose of a drug. Phase 2 is in a wider population, so 100 to 200 patients. And that's kind of looking at the safety of the drug and making sure that the drug is benefiting patients. You then have phase 3 and phase 4 trials. We don't run those as investigator-led trials. They're much run by pharmaceutical companies, big budgets, big numbers, and that's kind of more about testing the effectiveness of the trial against standard of care often. So what is a sponsor? So a sponsor is just an individual that's taking on the legal management of the trial. So they'll take the initiation, the management of a trial, financing of the trial, arranging the financing, all the way through to the end of the research. And so for us, that is Queen Mary University or Bart's Health, and it's kind of depending on employer of who's taken on the chief investigator of the clinical trial. So here, as you kind of all know, with the teams that you work with at Bart's, they run a mixture of hosted trials. So that's Bart's as a site. You have a study that's here taking place at Bart's. They just look after Bart's patients, and that can be sponsored by many other companies, pharmaceutical companies, other universities. Whereas the sponsored studies, which is my responsibility, is a study that's sponsored by our own institution, and we treat Bart's as a site like any other site around internationally for us. And this is kind of how we run. So the red team is the Bart's team that you will kind of all know and get to see face to face, the delivery group. And then this is our side, which is the ones that run the investigator-led units. So we have all the trials under our portfolio. We have statisticians, we have database programmers that make the database that the team put the data into. We have the trial statisticians, we have coordinators, and we have a biospecimen assistant. And then in the middle, we have a finance team, pharmacy team, QA team, which look after the safety of everyone. So we're a big team. This is my side and that's the Bart side. So we are joint, even though we're kind of separate in many respects. So the current portfolio of my side, we have, and this is of the open trials, we have 7 international trials. We have 10 drug trials, the CTIMPs, which is investigational medicinal products. We have 4 non-CTIMPs and non-drug trials, which are mainly either questionnaire based. We have a big urine, and we have, because I work in the university, we have lots of labs, so we're able to collect a lot of blood samples, urine samples, and they often the bases are kind of non-drug trials, often research based. So I'll go into a lot more detail about kind of what we have to do in regulatory wise, as what's kind of been alluded to, but in a brief kind of how trials are set up, doctors come to us with an idea they'd like to test. We spot them help to write protocol. We get funding, it gets approved. patients take part, we get the data, it's analysed and published. That's kind of, this whole thing is about 6 years, 7 years, 10 years in actual process. And I've got this, which is what we actually do. So this is a good checklist of kind of what happens within a clinical trial, everything that we are responsible for in my team. And if I take you through to all of this and to this point before kind of that ladder is what happens before a trial is open. So there is an amazing amount of steps that we have to do before we even get to open a trial at sites. And I'll take you through some of those steps. But yeah, this is quite a good kind of toolkit just to understand what we have to take responsibility for as a sponsor. So before a study opens, a few things that we are responsible for. We have to support the investigators to get funding. That kind of depends on the trial. Often it is the drug, if it's a drug trial, often the drug companies do provide funding as well as the drug. If it's more of a research base, we often go to charities, so Cancer Research UK help us, medical MRC, which is the Medical Research Council, they support some of our trials, but quite a lot of them are pharmaceutical based funding. And then because we have a lot of drug trials, we also have to forecast before a trial is even anywhere near getting approval. We have to forecast how much drug is going to be needed for the amount of patients required. So we have to forecast using our lovely sponsor research pharmacist to decide how many sites we're going to have, how many patients need to be at each site, and therefore how much drug we're going to need. And we have to label that drug with the companies as study drug. So all of that comes with the most amount of cost. Study drug is by far the most expensive part of our trials. We have to distribute to many sites to make sure that there's always enough. So if you're on a site with a drug trial, it's always labelled with a study drug. So therefore that's been pre-forecasted for the amount of drug we will need throughout a trial. We work to identify a number of sites, and the way we do that is usually about how many patients we need. How much, if we need to say 200 patients, we kind of want to have as many sites as we can afford to have in order to get the results as quickly as possible. We'll write all the documents required, so we'll support the investigators to write the study protocol, patient information sheets, which obviously would support the PPIE groups, informed consent form, and any ethically related documents that we need to apply for a trial. And then we apply for the actual approvals, and I'll go through kind of the different ones that we need to get. And we also create the clinical trial databases. So we have a database programmer that actually supports us, designs the database in order for us to get all the data from all of the sites around the world. And once all the approvals are in place, the trial can finally start, and we then go to open sites and we train the sites on how to run the trials. So BARTS for us is treated as a separate site, even though we're linked, and we will train them, initiate the sites, and then they can start recruiting participants into our trials. So how do we regulate clinical trials is good clinical practice. So that's the international ethical quality standard for us when we're conducting trials that involves any participation of human subjects. So that's everything that we have to work to is based on GCP. So the way that happens is we're regulated by the MHRA for drug trials, and they regulate all medicines in the UK. They focus on the study drug information and the protocols. They won't really look at your patient information sheet when we apply to them or throughout the trial. They're mainly only focused on obviously the drugs and the safety, and that we've designed a trial that's going to collect everything that's useful for that drug. They get a lot of information throughout the trial as well on the drugs. Whereas we also apply for ethics. So research ethics committees, as a lot of you are aware, their core function is to enable ethical research in the NHS. So they will review all study documents and any patient-facing documents, the patient information sheets, GP letters, but also the study design and the ethical forms that's called the IRAS form, which is the application form that we use. There are 87 research ethics committees in the UK. They consist of a variety of lay members, expert members, and the investigators should always attend the ethics meeting when we first apply for a clinical trial. That used to be actually going to the ethics committee. Obviously now, luckily, we can all be virtual rather than having to go all across the UK just to get someone to approve your research. So that's made it quite easy. And lastly, we have the Health Research Authority. that then once you have ethical approval and MHRA approval, you then get HRA approval that is responsible for the whole study-wide review, and they'll give final approval. So this all takes, by the time we have a protocol in place, once you submit to HRA, it's 60 days is their clock. Before that, you have to have everything else in place. So it's about a 9-month process from when the investigators first come to us and we're at approvals. So yeah, that I've kind of gone through all the approvals. So now we're at approval stage. And so then when a trial is open, finally sites can start recruiting their patients. There are a number of things that has been alluded to before, but what we have to do as a sponsor to make sure that a trial is run correctly and we're getting the data as we need to have it. So the sites are responsible for recruiting the patients. We are responsible for collecting the data, and we rely on the site team and the lovely nurses and the CTAs to give us that data. We monitor, as was alluded to make sure that the data we collect is correct. So we will check, monitors will go out to the sites, we will check the patient notes against what's in our database to check that the data is correct, true. We will also go to pharmacy to check that the correct drug was given to the correct patient. We will check all their paperwork, we will check any returns, we'll check labels, we'll check every prescription to make sure that everything was done correctly. So that's a big task, and that depends on the risk of the trial. We sometimes go on average 6 monthly to sites, and we will go, we have, if it's an international trial, we have a company in those countries that will do the monitoring for us, but we'll go all over the UK to monitor our trials. We collect information on the safety of the trial, so we get every adverse event, every side effect that happens, but also any hospitalization. We have a legal requirement to get that information to us within 24 hours. And we then have a legal requirement to give that information to the drug companies and to the sponsor and the MHRA in a yearly fashion. We collect a lot of samples, as I mentioned, and we're joined to the lab, so we have a lot of holding of samples. So all the samples that have just been gone through by the CTPs, they will keep them on site often, and we kind of get them sent to us in batches. We store them on site in our freezers and our tissue labs, and then we work with other labs across the world who will do analysing of our samples, that depending on how the trial is designed and what we're wanting to look at, ctDNA being the newest kind of thing that we're mainly collecting blood samples for. We do amendments at any time there's new safety information that comes out about the drug. We have to amend the patient information sheets, send them out to sites via an amendment, which is a 30-day at least process. When we get MHRA and ethics have to approve all that. We have to submit annual reports to update the MHRA and ethics separately. We also have committee meetings. So we have trial steering committees, trial management groups, and data monitoring committees, all 3 separate committee meetings with independent members that will assess your trial to make sure that we're doing everything safely, that the trial is working as it should, that everything is, the safety is kind of as expected, and also the recruitment is going well. So the management will be more about, are we going to manage to get results when we should do? And sometimes there'll be some analysis that goes on halfway through a trial to say if we needed to get, it depends on the design. So we will look at, after 20 patients, we might want to look at the safety of that, and that will be part of that. And the committees will look at those as well, and they can decide to stop a trial early if that feels like it's needed. So there's a lot that happens while that trial is ongoing, and that all happens concurrently. So all the time, our coordinators are kind of working on a multitude of these things. And again, so what do we measure in clinical trials? Well, obviously, the endpoints that have been shown to you all through this morning, we're looking at progression, whether the tumour is getting worse or getting better. We're looking at safety constantly. So by using your blood test results, that's often the data we're given. Regular assessments of your adverse events or side effects, any kind of ECGs, quality of life. We do a lot of quality of life questionnaires. That data all comes to us. If it's, as long as it's in the protocol where we get that data, we will not get any data that we're not allowed to get. We'll get it all anonymised, and it pulls together into our database. And so eventually you'll get to the end of your trial, and a clinical trial protocol has to have a defined end of trial, which is the point where the trial officially ends, and that's ethically, regulatorily defined. So I've listed a couple of end of trial definitions that we usually use. It's usually last study visit of the last patient in. After this, we're not allowed to collect any more data. So all the data after this point is not allowed, no longer covered by ethics, no longer regulatory. So we have to stop collecting data at that point. And we have to declare to authorities within 90 days of reaching that point. So after that, we have all the data. We have trial statisticians that analyses the data, and regulatory wise, we have a defined time of 12 months in order to get results out there after the end of trial definition is met, in order to ensure that data is out there as possible, quickly as possible. So we have to go regulatory wise, we have to get on a publicly available database, which is clinicaltrials.gov. I'm not sure if many of you kind of looked at that, but that's where we have to get our results onto. And also the investigators will write a publication journal in a scientific journal in that time also, or around the similar kind of time frame, and we support them with that. The trial statisticians will work, provide them with all the data. Different publications can happen depending on if you're looking at just the samples or just the endpoints. So often many publications come out of one clinical trial. And then our coordinators will go and close out sites. We have to physically go to the sites, check all their results, check all their paperwork, check their investigator sitebars, and allow them to close at that point. And then archiving, which I was related, we keep the regulatory for Barts and Queen Mary is that records are kept for 25 years after the study ends. We'll also provide the sites back with a copy of their data for their patients from our database in order for them to archive that as well. So that's kind of everything that kind of happens from the start to an end of a trial. It's kind of a flying visit, I'm aware of time, so kind of that's everything. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm aware it's kind of a flying visit, but that is everything that we do from a sponsor perspective. Thank you.
So if you know, 200, say that 200 patients on
Yeah.
the trial, and it ran for 3 years, and most of them just bobbed along, but there was say 5 or 10 that were really good on this drug, and then it stopped on January 1st. What would happen? Would you just pull the plug on them drugs?
No, so we have to keep the trial open.
Oh, really? But just for them 10 people?
Yeah, we have a trial currently that's got 1 patient on it, and that have been for a long time. We can still publish the data, so with some stats involved, you can still publish. You have to do a final analysis at the end. If those outliers kind of stay on, you have to do a final analysis once the trial ends, but you can still get the information out there without having to take patients off. Yeah, because obviously you want to get some results out there.
So you could have an average of, say, like 99 patients would be the average, and that one special person,
Yeah,
he might be cured.
yeah, and I think from my stats knowledge isn't amazing, but it's all factored in, and it probably wouldn't change the overall outcome of the trial.
Right.
Because from a stats perspective, it just wouldn't change, enough, even if one was on for 20 years. But we do support, and especially if it's a drug company, they will continue to supply that drug for as long as patients are getting benefit.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, just to add on, there are programs where trials could be potentially closed, but the pharmaceutical companies are still supplying for the treatment. So the patient is still on the site receiving the normal treatment, but just not as part of a clinical trial.
Yeah, if they're nice drug companies. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a question. Is there any way you know how much a trial costs?
So
If that can be shared.
for a 200 patient international trial, around 4 million. For an investigator, which is a lot cheaper than a big pharmaceutical company.
So, as I said at the beginning, an industry-led trial would be in the region of 200 million. So that's significantly cheaper, but much smaller.
Yeah, we're much cheaper. We don't get to, the investigators that come to us that do our initiator-led studies are because they're interested in looking at something rather than the drug companies that, they have. They need to get this data out. They have an agenda. Whereas we try and kind of have the more interesting trials that maybe the drug companies will fund, but they won't fund themselves, or they won't want to look into themselves.
I have a question on behalf of the group. And obviously this day is organised by our BARTS PPIE group, and many members of the group come every 6 weeks for meetings. Can you tell us from your perspective how important patient and public involvement is in all the research projects at Queen Mary's?
Yeah, definitely. I think because when I started, PPA wasn't part of it, and a lot of feedback when we would go to the ethics committees was that potentially it wasn't thought about at the forefront, and it's amazing that it has changed so much. I think there's been so much from an ethic committee perspective as well, just on the forefront of that, and it's really important that the patient information sheets are as clear as possible. And if it's so important to make things as clear. I can see how it's kind of different from what's going on in the trials at the moment, because we're adding in all these new sample collections, we're adding in interesting things, and I think that people are at the forefront of that and telling us whether that's a useful thing to do, a clever thing to do, wouldn't want to do, is really, really important, and that wasn't done before, I think. And I think now that we get involved using Frankie's lovely PPA group as early as possible when we're designing the studies to try and make sure that we're not adding in anything just because the doctors kind of want to, I think is really important. Yeah.
But how
Thank
do
you
we
very
know?
much.
Because we're basically idiots, aren't we? No, it's the truth, you've got.
But if you're willing to, yeah, telling you everything's right, yeah.
Then, and then there's me.
Well, yes, but then that's how we would help if it makes sense or not, even if it's just about the wording and whether we're explaining things correctly, because it's quite difficult for the consultants to write things in lay language.
Ultimately, if we are putting something down that's so scientific and it might be basic to us, if patients can't fully understand it, then
They
the
won't say
consent
yes.
providing isn't proper informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that it's written in language that everyone from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different sort of literacy levels can read and understand.
To pronounce some of the drugs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
drug pronunciation.
Yeah, that is very true. I think, a lot of it is difficult for all of us. Yeah.
Questions? Okay.
No, I was just going to ask, see, trials are different sizes. Is there a minimum number of participants for a trial to be able to go ahead?
So in phase 1s, 6 patients. And if it's first in man, we'll kind of do 3 stop, look at the toxicity of that, plus 3 more. It usually goes up to 9 patients, but that's kind of for the first in man, that's the minimum, yeah. Which obviously take a lot more resource at sites because it's a lot safety. It's the first time it's been put in. So that's quite tricky. They're the higher risk and the ones that take a lot more research from the nurses and the CTPs. Yeah.
We have a question online, Charlotte, you may answer, but I'm also happy to, about why there isn't more research and sponsorship in cardiology, and research in that area is so focused on cancer research.
Oh, I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Well, obviously, this is what we're talking about here is the cancer team. So the BARTS ECMC is the Experimental Cancer Medicine Centre. So we don't have any involvement in cardiology or allocation of budgets to other specialties. That's all kind of decided at a higher level.
There is the William Harvey Institute within Queen Mary, though, which is part on our campus, and that is cardiology. I don't know much about but there is a William Harvey Institute that will have a lot of research.
And I believe there's a few studies that are actually run. Charles might be able to help here, but there are certain treatments that can cause a cardiotoxicity, and the cardiology team are directly involved with the cancer teams.
Right.
So, the patients that are receiving this treatment could also potentially take part on cardiology studies.
That's right. So they visit us during clinic visits. So so the research team from cardiology and us, research team oncology, come to a patient, consent for their trial and our trial, and then we do our own tests together.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly what we want, right? Kind of big incorporated research within the country is amazing, and that's what ECMC is really good for, giving us funding to support other ECMC centres. Thank you.
And if you want to say something back there. Just think if we can hear from them. I'm not sure if the sound will work.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if you were commenting on my message posted in the chat, but I was asking not about cardiology, but because my husband had passed away from pancreatic cancer and was treated in various hospitals. And I wondered why there wasn't any, well, more research into pancreatic cancer, as dread disease, very low risk of survival, and whether BARTS might even take a lead in that. If you look at my online message, I think it might have been misinterpreted. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe I can answer.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
So I'm the research nurse for pancreatic cancer. Right now we have at least 3 that I can remember that is ongoing for pancreatic. Some have closed already, but we do have a lot of metastatic pancreas trials. The non-metastatic has closed already. So we do have studies for pancreatic cancer.
And we've got a few in setup, and we run a large urine study that's not a drug trial, but we're trying to look at biomarkers to try and get to look at kind of pancreatic prevention.
Yes.
And we're collecting, I think from 3,000 patients we're trying to get urine samples and blood samples from. So that's our ongoing kind of pancreatic, and we have just had one closed. So we definitely do have good pancreatic investigators. I guess our portfolio is predominantly, I guess in this room, is kind of GU and breast, but that doesn't mean that, we do have quite a lot, we do have got a lot of pancreatic,
I asked it because I didn't know about BARTS's work. It's good news, but Pancreatic the UK is petitioning now and keeps petitioning, and I signed them for more research because it is under-researched and such a terrible disease. And I would just hope BARTS gets all the money it needs for it. And if we can help in any way to push for it, please let us know.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's always the cancers that kind of get the biggest splash, isn't it, that gets more money, and that's not really fair, is it? So yeah, we're trying, and there's a lot of trials going on pancreatic. We are definitely trying.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Charlotte for her talk. So that concludes all of our speakers for our International Clinical Trials Day. As mentioned at the beginning, this is our 3rd annual event, and it's great to see so many of you have joined us. We've definitely grown since that first event we held 3 years ago now. So thank you all for our lovely speakers, for everyone who's attended both in person and online, and for your wonderful questions.
We finished half an hour earlier, so I'm sorry for those that are online, but we're going to enjoy our lunch here. Next year you can come in person and then you can enjoy the lunch with us. But thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you next year. This talk has been recorded, so it will be shared with you, and then we will upload it on our web. For those that are here on site, you can scan the QR code on your right, and it will take you directly into the web, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks the talks will be recorded and uploaded. Well, uploaded, not recorded. Thank you. Thank you.